The next part in our program will be the panel with the corporate members which are supporting the EGLCC. First of all, I hope you enjoyed the song and you're going to, as I said, learn more about it in the next break. We have about 45 minutes for this panel. And what I would like to do, I would like to give 2 minutes to each of you on the panel to introduce yourself and briefly your position in the company, but explain especially the diversity and inclusion activities and initiatives for the LGBTIQ pillar. Please not other minorities. So we're not going to talk about promoting women. We're not going to talk about promoting people with special challenges. So let's focus on that. I give you a very quick overview whom we're going to have as guests today. We have Nedra Dickson from Accenture. We have Timo Worrall from Johnson & Johnson. We have Alexandra Tarmo from Unilever, and we have Gael de Martelaere from Dow. Very exciting panel. Thank you very much to all of you for taking the time and being with us. And I would like to start with Nedra. I can see you already. All you have to do, yeah, you're unmuted. Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And my name is Nedra Dickson. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am with Accenture, so I'm a managing director at Accenture. And I just celebrated 21 years of being here. And I am based in the US in the Atlanta, Georgia location. So thank you for having me here. My role at Accenture, I think I have one of the best roles as I lead our global supplier inclusion and diversity team, where I really get to help LGBT-owned businesses integrate into the supply chain. So I not only get a chance to meet and develop amazing businesses, but I get to work and find innovative solutions on how to integrate them into our supply chain or those of our clients. And one of the other parts that I get to do, and now being aligned to strategy and consulting, I have the opportunity to not only do this at Accenture, I have the opportunity to really begin to help our clients as Accenture has been on this journey since 2002. And we continue to learn. And I'm so proud to be with EGLCC, as Peter Zerp and I on my team were talking, I think this morning, about meeting everyone in Philadelphia at an EGLCC conference years ago. So it is so amazing to see all of this come together. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Nedra. And thank you very much for getting up a little bit earlier, being at the your desk a little bit earlier, and now
my pleasure.
I the overseas participation. We really honor to have you with us. Timo, where are you calling from?
Yeah, I'm calling from Guildford in Surrey in the UK. So yes, so good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, and many thanks again for including us here at Johnson & Johnson as part of this incredible event. Yes, Timo Worrall, I'm the Director of Supplier Social Responsibility for Johnson & Johnson. I'm part of our procurement team, and I lead our supply diversity and inclusion program in all markets outside of North America. Joined by a number of my colleagues from all over J&J. Thanks for all of them for joining and showing your support as well for the EGLCC. Johnson & Johnson, we aspire to be the employer and healthcare company of choice for the LGBTQ community. And supporting the community extends not just to our employees and our customers, but how we also drive this mission through our supplier partners. You may not know, but at J&J, we're spending about $30 billion a year with about 50,000 suppliers all over the world. You know, that's a huge opportunity to drive impact. You know, supporting suppliers who are owned by members of the LGBTQ community is a really important part of our global supply diversity and inclusion program. You know, so global supply diversity and inclusion promotes, you know, how we drive societal impact through our suppliers, all at the same time as buying those goods and services we need as a company. but we drive to support economic inclusion and job creation for underserved populations, and also those populations that are really poorly represented in corporate supply chains. And we really see the LGBT community as being one of those. So I would say I like Nedra. We're some of the luckiest people in any corporate working in the supplier diversity space. It's a super area to be involved in, and we love our work, and I think that goes consistently for all of us. So just very, very happy to be here, and thanks again.
Thank you, Timo. Alexandra from Unilever, welcome.
Thank you. Just unmuting. Hi. Yeah, very happy to be here as well. I'm calling from Switzerland and called Zurich today. I'm at Unilever. I'm also sitting in procurement. I lead what we call partnership and social procurement. It's a relatively new job, but I'm celebrating 11 years at Unilever. I spent all my life in procurement, and I agree with Timo and Nedra. It's probably one of the coolest jobs I had so far. So what we mean by social procurement, I lead two of our key commitments, very linked. One is on supplier diversity and trying to increase our spend with underrepresented group. And of course, the LGBTQI is a key community we are trying to support. And then I'm also involved on a living wage commitment, which is very important. And also we know that underrepresented group tend to be more impacted by poor wages. So the two are very linked. Unilever, very similar, Timo. We spend having 34 billion, 56,000 supplier, latest count. Very global company, so huge opportunity to drive social impact across very different country and geography. So I'm always saying that we came probably late in driving supplier diversity, but we are accelerating our journey by doing it globally. So we crossed our path with the EGLCC last year when they were funding the chamber and wanted to be part of it, because one of our challenges is to get to know these businesses and then get to connect them with our procurement team. So I already have learned so much today about the business that presented before. So glad to be here.
Thank you very much for joining. And the last one on the podium would be Gael from Gael.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Gael de Martelaere. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm also calling from Switzerland, also in the neighborhood of Zurich, also cold and rainy. Now, I am not, unlike my other colleagues here, I'm not in supplier diversity, or I don't lead supplier diversity. I lead our logistics purchasing organization. Which brings its own challenges these days, but luckily it's brightened up by the fact that I do a lot of work in supplier diversity. And in addition to that, I'm the co-chair of GLAD in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India, which is our LGBTIQ plus employee resource group. Something about Dow, our ambition is to be the most innovative, customer-centric, inclusive, and sustainable material science company in the world. And although that ambition is only a few years old with the change of our CEO, we've been working on inclusion and diversity for decades. In fact, last year, GLAD celebrated its 20th anniversary. And so if you take a look at the two sides, supplier diversity, but also GLAD, if we start with GLAD, what we want to do there is really take a look at LGBTQ equality and equity in and outside of the workplace. And so we look there at equitable HR policies, equal opportunity hiring practices. We provide training to our employees. We work on advocacy around the globe, and we collaborate with our partners, just like what Nedra just said, in the value chain, and with also partners in our community. Now, when it comes to supplier diversity, the journey is a little bit younger. We started in 2018, and we first focused really on the United States, started working with the EGLCC, and as we look at expanding our supplier diversity efforts in Europe, EGLCC was a logical step to help build an overarching structure and a certification program for Europe. So super excited to be here.
Thank you very much. You all have been listening to the businesses and to the chambers. And what I would like to know, when you look at what you're already doing in the LGBTIQ field, what is the one thing you would, after what you've been hearing, you would like to add, you would like to modify, or maybe even do less? And I think I turn that question to Timo, because you have been somewhat longer involved with the EGLCC. So what is the one thing where you say, I'm taking that with me, we have to, focus a little bit more, we have to add something, or we rather, after what we've been hearing, shouldn't do anymore?
No, thank you for the question. I would say the one thing that comes out really strongly is the power of the network and how we need to do more of the networking. I mean, I think, it kind of summed it up for me when Deanna, talked about the work that Inatura are doing with Johnson & Johnson. This was news to me, okay? And that's the challenge we have in big corporations of even understanding our own businesses, never mind the world outside and the external environment where it's so important for us to understand. So I think that it really calls out for me the power of that network and how we as an organization, we want to connect with more LGBTQ suppliers. It's a fundamental strategy for us, and hence the power that this network brings and how we therefore partner up with you, all of you here through the EGLCC, to make that networking work. And I would say, with the challenge that everybody's very, very challenged on resources and time in their day jobs as their personal lives. Now, how do we do that in a really smart and good way that can bring value to you all and bring value to us?
Thank you. Nedra, you've been saying that for a long time, you're driving the topic into your customer database as well. What is the one thing you're doing for the LGBTIQ community of which you are especially proud?
Two things. One, I will say what we're doing inside of Atlanta as I lead our Atlanta Allyship for LGBT. And I think why that's so important is you have a voice. And I think it's so important to really bring all of the opportunities, the unique opportunities that you can find within the LGBTQ community. And I think as Gael was saying, with the disruption that we saw in the supply chain, I've just really been amazed at how some of the LGBT-owned businesses have stepped up to fill that gap. And there's plenty that has been in the retail space and has been in the restaurant space, and not only in the US, but I do see it expanding in Europe. So one of the things that I think if you go back to Timo saying on networking, what we've been able to do is really begin to find those unique opportunities. And I think in the past, if an opportunity was not right in front of us, we would say, and I'm saying this for myself, I'm like, oh, I don't have an opportunity to leverage your business. And things are changing. And I think now is when you literally have to sit down and have that conversation and find that unique opportunity. You can collaborate with many of the LGBT-owned businesses. And that's what we've been able to do now is that Peter and I have been talking, how can we now begin a development program for our LGBT-owned businesses and really help our clients find those. Accenture has 700,000 employees globally. So there's many opportunities in where we can find. And I think what we're standing out now is to create those opportunities. We can't wait for them to happen. And we have to create, and that goes back to partnerships, that goes back to networking, as Timo said. And I really think it's what we're trying to do. Don't just develop the business. Let's really pull back those layers and integrate LGBT-owned businesses in our supply chain.
How do you precisely leverage your network to drive the cause? I understand you work with clients on that. Do you do advisory work? Do you say, if you work with Accenture, you also have to understand our values and share them? How do you leverage that exactly?
We leverage them in two ways. Not only do we leverage them for ourselves internally. So I think it's important before we even go to our clients that we're walking the talk. So I want to make sure that Accenture has leveraged those businesses on a global basis, because everyone can say, yes, we can do this here in the US, as I'm a board member with EGLCC, and we have that forum. But then it goes a step further, and that's where it comes out in as we're going to our clients, and they want to know, how has Accenture been successful? So the other thing that we release our success stories in our report that is released to all of our shareholders, all of our firms, by our CEO, Julie Sweet. So it's not just coming from myself, from Peter, from our other supplier diversity procurement. It's being released by our CEO. And so that's where it is really starting from the top. But I think sharing those success stories in every platform, in every arena that we have, then we can begin to help our clients see, this is how we leverage, this is where we were successful, and this is where we might need help. And this goes back to how we can partner. So that's what I really love on EGLCC and these powerful corporations that we have right here now. Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, Dow. These are powerful global companies that we can collaborate. So I think that's the part where Accenture is looking at. How can we collaborate on here? So I'm excited because each one of these corporations we've collaborated with. And so why not continue to do that? As a conference, we all have voices, and we should leverage those voices to help our LGBTIQ businesses.
Let me share two observations. Three of you said I have the most wonderful job I can imagine when it comes to the topic. Some of you might be familiar with the Cologne Cathedral. And, it's one of the things when you go in there, it's always a special feeling. And once in a while, I turn to one of the custodians and say, you have the most wonderful workplace on this planet, being within the cathedral every time. And to me, it feels like you must feel like, the custodians and having the most wonderful workplace. I think that's really great. It's not that the CEO said, well, we have to cover that topic. Let's, appoint somebody who doesn't have to do enough work anyway. So seeing that passion and seeing this lever all of you are having is really encouraging. The second observation I would like to make, I think there's a certain parallel to when large companies discovered the recruiting opportunity for LGBTIQ people, because when the war, what is called the war for talent, started, they understood that they can neither forgo the opportunity to look in the female potential pool or the LGBTQI potential pool, that they really have to take a close look because they needed talented people wherever they come from. And it feels to me that, and that was basically a recruiting crisis because your growth was limited by that. And from what you're saying, it feels like the supply chain constraints, which we've seen through COVID and now probably also moving forward through the war in Ukraine, actually, it feels like there's a lot of opportunity to look close at supplier chances and actually broaden your supplier basis and then look at diverse businesses as well. So I don't want to quote again this typical thing with the Chinese character for crisis and opportunity, all of this, but I think it's a very parallel development and opportunity what we've seen in the recruitment area.
Absolutely, I would say the same. It is, as you say with the war on talent, here's the time now with the supply chain disruption to actually look for these unique opportunities and really fill this gap. You have to really begin to look at the businesses there because there's some amazing LGBT-owned businesses, and we like to share that as well.
Yeah, they usually have a track record of being very resilient, so sometimes it pays out in a crisis as well. Fingers crossed.
And if I can add on that, on top of the resilience, we also saw, for us being a consumer good, having consumer products, selling, we have 2.5 billion consumer every day consuming our product. We also realize that there is a representation. So, we also have LGBTQI consumer. And we had an example, we launched an inclusive deodorant in the US. And we want that deodorant to be designed and potentially even produced by LGBTQI businesses. So it's for us also a key imperative consumer. So there is more and more we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but we're doing it also because there is a growth opportunity. And on top of resilience, majority of our innovation are also coming from our suppliers. So, by bringing very diverse businesses, we're also getting more innovation in. So it's a growth agenda on top of a resilience agenda.
Timo, you are representing a large multinational corporation. I wonder, how do you align global objectives and national measures, and where do you really have to adapt what you're doing for the LGBTIQ initiatives?
No, great question, actually. I mean, firstly for J&J, our credo guides us. And if you've never read about our credo, do Google it. It's the set of values that we use here for all decision making at Johnson & Johnson. And it calls out all our needs to serve our many stakeholders, including our communities. So I think there's that piece, first of all, that we point to when we're I guess driving the objectives to work with LGBT suppliers. I mean, secondly is our global supply diversity and inclusion program. One thing for us that's really important is we as an organization must always be relevant in all the many different countries in which we operate. What we cannot do as a company is take one sort of cookie cutter, one size fits all approach and push that down into all of our markets. What we must do must deliver local impact, local value to all our business partners and the stakeholders. That could be local customers, governments who are a big customer of ours, as well as public healthcare systems. So being relevant locally is super important. Some things are consistent, however, for J&J, like target setting. So, one good example for us is all our category teams have targets for diverse spend all over the world. So everybody's got an expectation that this is being delivered upon. And all these roll down from the very top of our business, from our Health for Humanity 2025 goals, which are external corporate responsibility commitments, all the way down to our procurement category teams. So, I will call out that we have category strategies, of course, at global and regional level, strategic suppliers that we work extensively with, but also many, many local suppliers across our business who are very close to our markets. That includes all over Europe, and we have significant operations in many markets here, Belgium, Germany, France, Switzerland, Italy, Czech Republic, and Sweden, just to name a few. So we do need to be relevant and close to those local markets. I'll just finalise by saying, although this can add complexity into a global business like ours, we do think it's really important to add value locally, and it's really something that we all very deeply care about.
Alexandra, I would like to turn to you, because my understanding is that you started not too long ago with a specific program, and I would like to understand, when did you start and which achievements have you made so far? We've learned that Accenture has been on its way for a long time. Johnson & Johnson has been on its way for a long time. Dow has. But I would like to know, how is it if you basically have to catch up a little bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the program started in the US in 2018 and then expanded in South Africa. The global program was born in 2020, officially launched in January 21. So it's a baby program, but I think we made quite good steps. So 1 year in the program, first we were very keen to go global, and we made a conscious choice to go global and announce a 2 billion euro spend on an annual basis that we will deliver by 2025, starting from something that we didn't really knew, because it's also hard to know, but was below 300 million. In 1 year, we just report, and indeed, like my colleagues, we reporting externally. We decide that we will be reporting externally, and we'll take the courage to be transparent on our achievements. So we just report our number. We achieved 445 million in the first year, which is a great achievement. We were thinking that we will do that. The bad news is that probably below 1% of that is with LGBTQI businesses, and it's a good news because there is a lot we can do, but it's a very low starting point. Majority of these businesses are in the US. So for us now, it's really about how we continue to, and like all my colleagues said, partner, join forces, join chamber to get to know these businesses and connect them with us. What we also did, which is a key achievement, is that now, very similar to Timo, in 1 year, we managed to get that target down, cascade to procurement. So our procurement team will actively be looking for diverse businesses. But the one question is always, where do I find them? How do I connect them to my businesses? And last but not least, the ongoing challenge for big corporate is how we make sure that we can also make their journey into a big corporate as easy as possible. And hence I'm spending all my time trying to work with my colleagues internally on having to maybe sometimes adapt the way you engage with corporate and also adapting our system, because we are not small business ready, I would say. Yeah, so that's in a snapshot where we are. We have already started in countries across the world, in Asia, in Africa, in Europe, and we are expanding this year in the rest of Europe and adding few countries in the rest of the world, which I also have to say clearly from an LGBTQI community, we have to be careful how we navigate certain countries, taking in consideration legislation, and also how we could get processes to be able to identify these businesses without making any harm.
Thank you. I'm sure that all of you are reporting on those initiatives within your ESG reporting, which will become even more and more important. Your initiative contributing to the social pillar. I would like to make a personal remark. I know that Diana, who was on the business panel earlier, she would certainly point out that one of the things you can do to increase your environmental footprint is to donate products rather than to dispose of them. We've just learned from Timo that Johnson & Johnson is doing that. And by the way, not only in Germany, but in the UK and in France, whatever. Unilever isn't. So I'm sure that Diana will take the liberty of catching up with you after this. It's not the topic of this conference, but it's a great pay-in to the ESG reporting. Gael, what I would like to know, Dow is basically the youngest kid on the block of the EGLCC members, corporate members. Why did you finally join, I have to say, because you've been on the road for a much longer time, or Dow has been working on the topic for a much longer time. And what do you expect from the EGLCC, what you cannot find in any other diversity network?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So when I think about the other LGBTIQ networks that we're active in, you can think NGLCC, HRC, Out and Equal, Involve, and a couple of others. Most of them are already well established, right? And some of them have a global presence. Some of them are more strictly US focused. But I think the opportunity that is in front of us with the EGLCC is that we can build a structure that can extend its influence European-wide. We heard today about, or from a couple of the chambers of commerce, if you translate that to the work that a corporate would have to do if we go out with an RFQ and RFI, we would essentially have to address all of these chambers of commerce to figure out what are those LGBTQ-owned companies that we can introduce to our bid. And so having a pan-European view on this is going to be critically important. And I think one of the initial conversations that we had with Fabienne and Pavel, we spoke about the growth story. And that's really what spoke to the Dow team quite a bit. So our expectation, I would say, joining the EGLCC as a founding member is we're not alone, right? And so we talked about networking and ensuring that you use that network of corporates, you connect it with some of the chambers of commerces, but you're going to have a collective of in this particular case, 4 founding members who, by the way, are all value chain partners. Yeah, I can confess that after 1 year of the supplier diversity journey, we pulled one party in, and that was actually Nedra, to come help us figure out how to do supplier diversity. And so I'm hopeful that with the EGLCC that we can start almost like, it's a bit of a weird word today, but a revolution when it comes to supplier diversity in Europe. And I think the beauty of our 4 companies is that while some of us have started, a year ago, 2 years ago, some of us have been in it for a while. And so we can bring some of the learnings together that we've had over the couple of years and really start looking at, I would also almost say, accelerating some of the programs that we have in some of the other regions. And I'm just thinking, for example, mentorship programs and training programs. And so I don't necessarily think that we're going to do anything different with the EGLCC, But with everything that we've got, with the baggage that we all have and the experience, I see it as an opportunity for acceleration.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of really good questions coming in on supplier diversity. One says that there are other corporates on the calls which do not yet have experience with supplier diversity. So when large multinational corporations like yours talk about million-dollar commitments to diverse supplier base, maybe that's a little, I wouldn't say overwhelming, but the question is there a simple way? I mean, if you're smaller, if you're new to it, what is a simple way of starting with supplier diversity as a first step? Who would like, of the four of you, who would like to take that one?
Maybe I can start. Yeah, maybe I can start. I think the first thing is, I think you have to realize that you probably already do business with LGBTQ companies, but you just don't know about them. Yeah. And so figuring out how to identify them is really the very first step. And so you've got many databases out there and many tools available to you, commercial tools that can help you identify what LGBTIQ companies are out there and then identify which ones you work with. So that would be the first thing. The second thing, and our goal is 500 million by 2030. Yeah, so we're in a different space in the value chain. But what I would highly recommend other corporates to do is reach out to your network, because one of the things that I've learned is this is a competitive space. In many instances, you work with, in our case, for example, we work with other material science companies that are our competitors. When it comes to supplier diversity, there's no competition. And we all want essentially to do the same thing, which is not only the right thing, but it just feels good as well. And so what I would say is identify who in your network, whether it is a competitor or whether it's a supplier or a customer, is already doing supplier diversity, and figure out how you can leverage from them, because that's going to accelerate your journey tremendously. I know it did for us after reaching out to Accenture. And not trying to load too much work on Nedra at this point, but they are phenomenal in sharing their knowledge.
One question related to that is also, is there a minimum size of business to cooperate with larger corporates? So in other words, an LGBTI supplier, is there a minimum size? I would think that if you want to broaden your supplier base, you also have to make some compromises in terms of saying those are not only A size or B size suppliers. So I see a no, head shaking from Gael, a no from Alexandra. Okay, so it feels like if you want to have a broader supplier base, you have to get to start somewhere. You don't establish hurdles which basically make it impossible to get into the game. Okay, another question I'm seeing here, that there was another good one. Yeah, Lena from our first panel said, do you have stories to share on how you found LGBTIQ suppliers in countries where it's illegal or very difficult to be out? I mean, Gael, you made the point, first of all, you have to identify them. But how do you deal with that if you are in an environment where it's very difficult to identify openly as an LGBTIQ business?
Yeah, maybe I can start with that. And I'll take the question from another perspective, which is our ERG, or GLAD ERG. I mean, in the end, you have to start from the fundamental principle that you want to keep your employees safe. And in some instances, like for example, Russia and some African countries where it is illegal to be LGBTQ, that unfortunately contradicts a little bit with what you as an organization want to go do, which is basically you want everybody to bring their whole self to work. But it really starts with that safety first. And if we cannot guarantee the safety of our employees by openly advocating for LGBTQ, for our LGBTQ colleagues, we essentially take a step back on the advocacy space. And so, for example, I can say in Russia, we do not have a GLAD network just because of that reason. And I think you have to see it a little bit in that same context from a supplier diversity perspective too, is you want those companies to be safe first, and the employees that work in those companies to be safe. So at this point, it becomes increasingly difficult, of course, to be able to identify in those particular countries. No.
Okay. Would anybody else like to share on this topic? Nedra.
Yes, I would agree with Gail. I definitely want to state the importance of safety first, and that comes with, you know, there's research that's been done where it's not a very high number where LGBT feel safe in their workplace, that they haven't gotten a promotion or something because of you know, being able to come out. But then the same is with the business. Many do not want to identify as the LGBT business because that might be detrimental to their business. And so I think the safety part is absolutely non-negotiable. That is the most important. And so what we have done with some of our businesses, and we did in India before, in some of those countries where it was illegal, is that we created some of those pride circles and being able to be safe to where we can begin to work with some of those businesses. And again, working in where we might partner with some large other, you know, business there to really be able to start building, you know, some type of, you know, work there, but again, making sure that it's safe. And that's even when we're having people identify in Accenture as we're still making sure it's still safe. In some countries where even if you're out, many people have biases, and that unconscious bias that we want to make sure that's not there. So we do recognize that that is the issue. And as Gail said, I think safety, non-negotiable, that has to be first.
And I'm just seeing a comment in the chat saying thank you to both for talking about safety. Nedra, you're joining us from Atlanta, and I mean, we've also seen some concerning backlash developments in the US, where it could be even difficult for you not only to identify as an LGBTIQ business, but even to cater LGBTIQ customers. I'm just thinking about this bakery, which baked this wedding cake for, I think, for two men getting married. I mean, those are things which were unimaginable in the Western countries, at least until about a couple of years ago. So the backlash, partially due to COVID, is also, I mean, it's also hitting that segment or that community in how should I say, in societies where we thought we would have left that behind us.
That is true. And even one other thing that I believe COVID exposed was the healthcare for LGBTQ during that time. And you think that we've made progress, yet you see in Florida where they're trying to push a bill to no longer say the word gay. And you begin to think it's 2022 and I'm here. So I think that's where it's so important with the allyship, and where we have a voice and we have to leverage that voice. And that is, you know, what I love is that when that happened with the bakery, corporations, not just Accenture, was standing up and saying, you know, we're not going to go for that. And it didn't have to wait and say, oh, what are you corporations going to do? It was that stand. And I think that's what we have to do more now than ever. And I've been at Accenture 21 years, and I tell you, there's been some good and bad days, and mostly good when I get a chance to see that we don't have to be forced to join in when something is right. And I believe right here in Atlanta, and actually where I live in Atlanta, Virginia Highlands, Midtown, we have a section of our town that has the LGBT rainbow painted on our streets permanently. and our mayor, did that. That has been vandalized twice in the last 2 months. And you start to begin to see who's going to speak up and who's the voices. And what I really like to see is, again, it was more allies that came out. The mayor came out and said, you do it, we're going to repaint it. So you're not going to stop this because of, whatever, hate that you have within you. So I think that's so important, as Gail and, and everyone, Alexandra and Timo was saying, these 4 corporations, we have a lot of spend. We have a long reach in what we're doing. So even though the West is here, you see we're taking steps backwards. So we need to continue to push forward and not allow those to step backwards.
Thank you so much to all of you. I think that has been a fascinating panel. I love the aspect of that you would like to network with each other. As you said, you have a big spend, you have a big lever, and it's great that you take on this responsibility.